They don't need your guns if they have your children, and they are taking them out from under you right now.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. My name is Rhonda Villamont-Smith. I'm the president of Tulsa 912 Project. The other person that's going to be here with us today is Lori Gracie, and she is the vice president of Tulsa 912. We wanted to put this together because there is so much out there that's going on that so many people don't understand. We think we understand it, and then we find out it's something different. Mark Ousley is going to come up and he's going to speak on diversity, equity, and inclusion that's going on at OU and in Norman. We've got Jenny White's going to talk about social emotional learning. And then we're going to have Sandy Harrell come in and talk about the classroom, what it's going to take to get and retain good teachers, maybe what even a classroom looks like. You know, we think we know what it being a teacher is all about, but she's going to let us know. Then we'll take a break, and then Cindy Bird will be here, and we're going to talk about the tax dollars. Where are our tax dollars, our educational tax dollars going? And during that, there may be a little bit of time for Q&A, depending on how much time we have left and once she's done her presentation. Then at about 11:30, lunch will be here. We'll go grab our lunches, come back in here from 12 to 1. We will have the 3 superintendent candidates, and then and then we'll take a break. And then the library books, we're going to have Janice Danforth with Moms for Liberty and Sheriff Regalado. And the reason I've asked Sheriff Regalado to attend is because I think that people don't really understand exactly how bad the books are. And is this pornography that's being put into our schools through our library system? And if I took that book out and read it at a public park to a group of children, could I get in trouble for that? And so I think that these are questions that people need to ask to be able to understand just this, how serious it is, these books that they're being put in. It's not that we're trying to ban books. These are just not good books. And I've got excerpts and stuff that I promise you, once you read, it's going to embarrass you. It just does. It embarrasses you to read it, and to think that our young children are getting that is horrible. So, and then from there, we're going to go into the school choice debate. We've heard so much about school choice. We recognize that our education system is broken, and we've got to do something to fix it. So what is it? Is it vouchers? Is it tax credits? What is it? And so we've got Jenny White, who is probably the leading authority in the tax credits as far as being an advocate for that. And then we'll have Jonathan Small from OCPA, and he'll talk about the vouchers and why he thinks that those are the best. And let's have that discussion, and then we decide what we believe, instead of listening to all just the talking heads and the things that we keep hearing. So our goal is to provide you with a ton of information in a short period of time, although it is a long period of time because it's an all-day event. But I think that we can, I think we're going to walk away here with a little bit greater knowledge as to what exactly is going on in our education system. So with that, I'm going to bring Lori up here, and then we will have action items at the end of the event as well, because it doesn't help if we just tell you what the problem is if we don't give you some solutions to help make a difference. So please join me in welcoming Lori Gracie.
Thanks, everyone, for being here. One other thing I wanted to note, our microphone does not amplify, so if you're not hearing amplification, there's a reason for that. This is strictly for our video so that we get good audio. How many of you have ever done videos and you realize the audio is always the biggest challenge? So, yeah, so that's why our mic is direct to the camera. Our speakers have about 30 minutes apiece today, so I don't want to take too terribly long with introductions and such because we want to give them as much time as we can. But today we have Mark Ousley, who's going to be speaking to us about diversity, equity, and inclusion and what's happening with that in the classroom. Mark is a music educator. He has a wonderful bio that I'm not going to read all of it to you. He is a FEARS Fellow at the Oklahoma Council for Public Affairs, where he has published several articles on critical race theory in Oklahoma, which is another issue and problem that we have in our classrooms. And you can see him and follow him on Twitter. He's known as Unwokeable. Do you like that? So let's give a round of applause and bring Mark up today.
All right, let's see if I can put this up here and. All right. How are y'all doing today? Good? You awake? Yes. Yeah. Well, not woke, but awake, right? Good. Good. I want to make sure we get this up here.
We're getting there.
Yeah, technology works always when you don't really need it to. But okay, yeah, this is the subject. You can go ahead and go to the next slide there. But what I want to first say, and just to crib off of what our vice president here just said, DEI and CRT are the exact same thing. Okay, and I'm going to explain to you how that is. What you get in public schools, private schools, all schools, colleges. When you have a DEI department, their only job is to enforce the tenets of CRT in the school through policy. That is their only job, okay? And I'm going to show you exactly how they do that and why they do that and how they fool you with the shell game, because what they have a tendency to do is say, well, this is anti-racism. You can't be against that, can you? Right? Well, it's not critical race theory, it's diversity, it's equity, it's inclusion, right? All of them are the same thing, okay? So do not be fooled by the shell game, okay? And don't let them, you ever heard of James Lindsay? Okay. James Lindsay is a great friend of mine. I brought him down here a couple of times, and he has something he likes to say. The woke, they share your dictionary, or they share your vocabulary, but not your dictionary. Okay? And understanding that is the first step in identifying, discerning, and removing this from schools. And I will tell you this, and this is my sincere belief, and you are going to hear a lot of things today about a lot of different topics, but I venture to say that most of them will come back to this subject because it is one of the leading issues in the country and will be for the next however long until we get rid of it, to be honest. But nothing will happen, nothing will stop this unless your officials, starting with your state superintendent, whoever that may be, okay, your governor, right, your congressman, your senator, everybody, your school board understands that where there is DEI, there is CRT. And where there is CRT, there is racist discrimination. But not just racist discrimination. The whole gender queer theory ideology is wrapped up in that too. Okay? So DEI's only, the offices and their officers, I call them commissars, right? Because they push a political ideology. It's the only reason they exist. Okay? Unless we get rid of these offices, we are going to be putting out fires across all of the state in perpetuity, which is what they want. So, I'm gonna end my message, but I'm gonna start it. I'm not ending right now, but I'm gonna begin where I'm gonna end. Make your officials defund DEI in the university first, and then every single school district after the fact, and have them write laws, bills, rules, policies, whatever you can, to not allow them to just change the name out from under you. Okay, and still do the exact same thing, okay? We can go to the next, let's go back one. I just want to explain. What I'm going to show you in very small part is, as example, here is the Teaching for Equity teacher training from Norman Public Schools, okay? This was offered in the spring of 2021, okay? Right before 1775 was passed, okay? This is still happening in violation of state law. They aren't doing the trainings, but you'll see how it's happening in a second. So first, let's go. What is critical race theory, okay? So I'm just gonna read this to you because the impact on the ears is very important, okay? This comes from a book called Critical Race Theory and Introduction. This is written for K through 12 schools, okay? For teachers in K through 12 schools. So when they tell you, oh, CRT is just a law class, it's just, it's not in schools, it's just at university level, again, shell game, okay? That's all that is. So I'm just gonna read to you in their own words. See, here's the thing. They loved writing and speaking before James Lindsay, Chris Rufo, other people made this a national issue, okay? So they tell you plainly, and all you have to do is read their words. Nobody says it better than them, and nobody makes them look worse than they do, okay? So here's the beginning of critical race theory and introduction. The critical race theory CRT movement is a collection of activists and scholars interested in studying and transforming the relationship among race, racism, and power. Power, remember that, okay? The movement considers many of the same issues conventional civil rights and ethnic studies discourses take up, but place them in a broader perspective that includes economics, history, context, group and self-interest, and even feelings and the unconscious, right? Unlike traditional civil rights, which embraces incrementalism, step-by-step progress, critical race theory questions the very foundations of the liberal, little l, order, okay? Including equality theory, that's MLK, legal reasoning, okay? The rule of law, Enlightenment rationalism, the scientific method, linear thinking, okay? And the neutral principles of constitutional law. We just named a Supreme Court justice to the Supreme Court that believes that the neutral principles of constitutional law do not apply. That's why her sentencing was the way it was, because she doesn't believe that that contract with the people of the United States is in effect. Why? Because she gets to change the language, okay? The US Supreme Court's about to go under a struggle session, and it's going to last as long as she's alive. Understand that, okay? And that her whole job is going to be to move that court as far away from the base aspects of the Constitution as she can. Now, here's where it gets into schools, okay? Although CRT began as a movement in the law, it has rapidly spread beyond that discipline. Today, many in the field of education consider themselves critical race theorists who use CRT's ideas to understand issues of school discipline. Where do you most often, you don't see school discipline in a university. Very rarely, for very, bad things. You see school discipline in a K through 12 school, okay? Right? That's where you see it. School discipline, let me find my spot. Hierarchy, tracking controversies over curriculum and history, and IQ and achievement testing. This is DEI. That's all it does. Try to find a description of your school's DEI office. They may not call it that. Find them, they're there. I promise you, especially in Tulsa, okay? They're definitely there in Norman. They even call themselves DEI. But find them and see what their description is, okay? See what they have purview over. What it is policy. Political scientists ponder voting strategies coined by critical race theorists. Ethnic studies courses often include a unit on critical race theory, and American studies departments teach material on critical white studies developed by CRT writers. Have you ever heard of Robin DiAngelo? White fragility? I'm gonna shock you right now. The precursor to Robin DiAngelo and white fragility and the whole critical white studies movement began at the University of Oklahoma in 1979. An author, a professor of human relations at OU named Judith Katz wrote the first white fragility called White Awareness, published by University of Oklahoma Press, 1979. the leading, the largest professional development organization in the country, possibly the world, for DEI officers is housed at the University of Oklahoma. They have been doing this for years. Only just recently did they name DEI. They have 7 institutions, including your College of Education, that is devoted to this ideology and embedding it in everything they do. That's OU is the center of this for the nation. Don't let your 3 people that come in here running for state superintendent forget that. I know I'm not, and they know I'm not, okay? They hear from me often. So, unlike some academic disciplines, critical race theory contains an activist dimension, okay? It not only tries to understand social situations, but to change it. To change it. It sets out only to ascertain, not only to ascertain how society organizes, but to change it. You can move to the next slide. Theory and praxis. You know what the word praxis means? It's Latin for in practice. Okay? So theory, critical race theory is the ideology. DEI are divisions of ideological enforcement designed to make teachers put into praxis critical race theory in everything they do in the classroom and out of the classroom. And you'll see that next. Okay? So I'm going to take you to, this is a slide. Okay? Is this my video? Yes. Just one second. This is a slide from or a snippet of the video from the Norman teacher training, okay? Notice the graphic and notice the quote from Ibram Kendi. Have you heard of Ibram Kendi? How to be an anti-racist, okay? Where they get you here, again, another shell game, critical race theory, anti-racism, okay? And DEI. Those are the 3 pillars of critical race theory in our society. Anti-racism, Kendi is the creator of that term, okay? It's inherently Marxist. You know what Marxist theory is? Let me just break it down for you very easy. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Racism, anti-racism, synthesis. If anybody says, well, there's no Marxism in this, it's literally in the definition of the way Kendi describes it, okay? And he defines it, though, in terms specifically of public policy. What has public policy? Institutions have public policy, okay? Schools, which is where we're going to focus. But guess what else does? Colleges, right? Communities like the city of Norman, which we'll get to. But he defines it like this. He defines anti-racism and equity, the pursuit for equity. If there is the word equity, there is critical race theory, period. Do not allow anything into your school that says the word equity because it is not equality, okay? Equity demands something very specific in order to make it happen, something illegal, both in federal now and in state law, okay? But he says, either one allows racial inequities to persevere as a racist or confronts racial inequities as an anti-racist. You don't get to be not racist, right? Okay? You're either racist or anti-racist. Think of matter. Have you ever, I'm going to take you to science for just a second. Matter and antimatter, okay? They're the same thing. They're just moving in different directions. Okay, that's literally, made up of the same properties, they're just moving in different directions. Okay, so I'm going to play this for you and you can listen to her.
Our social justice education, I have a quote here from Ibram Kendi, and it really, for me, sums up when we have heard, and there's so much conversation about becoming anti-racist. So one either allows racial inequities to persevere as a racist or confronts racial inequities as an anti-racist. And so when you take a closer look video, perfectly fine, but I want you to really kind of look at this graphic and take in some of those different pieces and really see, kind of tweak out or pick out the difference between moving from that fear zone into the learning zone, from the learning zone into the growth zone. Because what you'll notice in that growth zone is you surround yourself with others who think and look differently. And although this is a becoming anti-racist graphic, that actually can go with anything when you think about issues that marginalized groups encounter. Do you talk to others do you only talk to others who think and look like you? Or do you listen to others who think and maybe look differently than you? And then that third piece is, are you surrounding yourself with others who think and look differently than you? Very, very, very important.
Okay, so now she picks the most innocuous part of this to highlight, but she said, make sure that you pause it and you look at the things in the growth zone, okay? All the way around, she likes to use graphics. Remember that? She said that? But all of the anti-racist trainings, all the DEI trainings like to use graphics that look linear and make sense, but are not. They're all jumbled up so you don't catch what they're trying to do, okay? Because if you put it in order, it becomes very plain what she wants from you, okay? And you gotta also understand that she presented earlier in this presentation a graph that showed, okay, 53% of our people are white, cisgendered, meaning not, non-binary, trans, or anything like that. And the other remaining are all of the other. So she makes two groups out of multi-groups of people, okay? But she puts white, cisgendered in one area and everyone else in the other, making two dichotomous groups. And then she says one is an oppressor and one is a victim, okay? And therefore, and then she puts up another slide, okay? And she says, guess what, teachers? These faculty, staff, and administrators are always 80% white and cisgendered. So I'm talking to you. So when she says, I want you to surround yourself with others who look and think differently than you, she's assuming what you think based upon your identity, first thing, right? And then she's weaponizing your empathy against you, okay? To say, you feel bad, I want you to feel bad, and do what I say. Okay, so I want you to go 2 slides over. Can you do that real quick as I put it out of order? Okay, look at the growth zone. Okay, right next to the quote. Okay, she gives a viewpoint and she lays out the work, and this is what they call it all over the place. It's the work. Do the work. Do the work. Right? You know what's right out front of Auschwitz? The sign. What does it say? What does that mean? Work makes you free. Work makes you free. Okay, yeah. So. Go to the next slide. This is the work in order. This is the growth zone in order, okay? The first one is the thing that she mentioned, and in the parentheses, me, but I'm just gonna read it as if it was one full thing, but just know that the parentheses is my interpretation based on what she says, okay? It says, I surround myself with others, those who agree with CRT DEI, who look and think differently than me. Okay. Number 2, I identify how I unknowingly benefit from racism as defined by Kendi and Williams. Okay. Racism, okay, is any inequity between a disparate group. That is Kendi's definition of racism. And if you notice, he always spells it with a capital R because he's making a distinction. Okay. Always making a distinction between how you know racism, how we know racism, which is racist discrimination, right? Okay, and how he's defining it, which is in the terms of public policy, okay? I sit with, internalize, accept as unquestionably right and necessary my never-ending discomfort. So the way it reads for him is that I sit with my discomfort and let that affect me if you are a member of an oppressive class, okay? This is what he's telling. This is what your DEI instructor's telling your teachers to do in Norman Public Schools, okay? I don't let my racist mistakes, as defined by Kendi and Williams, deter me from being better or doing the work, right? Okay? I speak out when I see racism, and as defined by Kendi and Williams, okay, in action, meaning that now teachers, Kendi says that racism is a normal part of life. It is in everything that happens. It's not whether racism is present, okay? Racism is assumed to be present. It's just your job to find it. That's what they're telling your teachers to do. There's racism in everything that happens, especially public policy, and especially people who enforce the public policy, okay? So it's your job to find it and then weaponize it, okay? That's your job. If you're required to find something as a part of your job, you will, even if you have to make it up, right? Or even if you have to overblow something or assign intentions to somebody, impact always supersedes intent. If that's your modus operandi, okay, if that's the way you operate, you will always look to the worst intention and say that that is the case, especially in any policy, okay? I educate my peers how racism harms our profession, okay? So now the teachers start affecting each other, right? If they see it, Norman Public Schools just recently sent this to the Secretary of Education, who you'll see later, and I said, look, they're doing equity walks. What's an equity walk? They have teachers in every school walk around the school while the teachers aren't there and report back to the DEI office what's on their walls, what materials they're using, and make sure, as they say, in their ongoing effort to enforce this ideology in the classroom on a daily basis. They're doing that right now, okay? Here's number 7. Here's the great one, okay? Didn't seem to apply to Bria Clark in Norman, Oklahoma, but we got her out. That's fine. But this, I yield positions of power to those otherwise historically marginalized. That's a requirement. Unless you speak with what they call the ally or black voice. They distinctly remove the body from the mind and the voice, and they say this is Nicole Hannah-Jones, the author of the 16/9 Project. She says, you can be black and not be politically black. You can be black and not speak with a black voice, meaning that you have to agree with this redistributive method of going about things, or you're not black. That's why they can call Larry Elder the black face of white supremacy. It's why Joe Biden can say, if you're not voting for me, you ain't black. Right? It's why they could call the last Supreme Court justice the first black person on the Supreme Court, because they remove, Clarence Thomas is not a Kendiite, right? Okay? But he's not black. She is, okay? And then I promote and advocate for policies and leaders that are anti-racist, as defined by Kendi and Williams. So now these are what you have to do in order to be in the growth zone as required by Norman Public Schools DEI. It's right there. She's enforcing it every day. She's an administrator. It's her only job. If you walk around Norman Public Schools right now, all of them, it's Black History Month all the spring semester. Now, it's not, I have no problem with that. I've studied Martin Luther King, and the civil rights movement has actually been a great passion of my life. It's why I'm standing here in front of you today, because it was a passion of mine from like a very young age. It was very strange, okay? But I was a nerd, okay? And I've read everything he's ever written, everything. And this is a perversion of the civil rights movement. Yes. It is, okay? Let's go back because I put it out of order. I just wanted to highlight this real quick. There's our 3 pillars, but here's Bria Clark, okay? So glad we got rid of her. But she is, it's worth noting, a professor at OU. She was recruited at OU to run for mayor of Norman, Oklahoma. I've got that ironclad, okay? But this is right after she defunded the police, and she did a DEI training ran by the University of Oklahoma, okay? And it says, and here is a better definition or a more detailed definition of what being anti-racist is, or what a racist policy is. I'm just gonna read it to you because it's worth, and this is from Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist. A racist policy is any measure that produces or sustains racial inequities between or among racial groups. Policies are written and unwritten laws, rules, procedures, processes, regulations, and guidelines that govern people. They govern people. The laws don't govern people. I just want you to understand that there's this huge chasm between the law and the people. It's called public policy, okay? It's why you could pass 1775 in 2021 and not have the rules until a year later when they figured out how to skirt most of them. Okay? There's no such thing as a non-racist or race-neutral policy or person, because you can't be racist, you can't be non-racist, you can't be anti-racist unless you support anti-racist policies, which means you have to support redistribution of wealth and power by a public policy, which is, yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's communism, it's socialism, right? Okay? It's a nice cocktail of all three. And actually, if you want to take the corporate aspect of this, when you see Disney and you see all this other thing, it's communo-fascism, because they're merging government and government power together in order to influence society. And people are like, well, that can't work. Thesis, antithesis. What's the opposite of communism in our historical mind? Fascism, you're right, or that's take it to the left's viewpoint, right? Fascism, the way that they define it is the uber right version of capitalism. But I will say this, Kendi says that you cannot be anti-racist and be a capitalist. He says that explicitly. You have to be anti-capitalism in order to be anti-racist. Well, what's the opposite? Communism, okay? But every policy in every institution, in every community, in every nation is producing or sustaining either racial inequity or equity between racial groups. Racist policies are also expressed through other terms such as structural racism, systemic racism. Racism itself is institutional, structural, and systemic. So he takes it out of the personal and puts it right into the political, into policy. So you have to do in order to not be racist. You have to support what he says you should support in order to not be racist. Okay, let's go to the next one. Actually, so go one more. There we go. So how do you do that? He tells you, okay? The only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. It's illegal. That's illegal. So he requires that policy be enacted in order to create equity on the front end. On the front end. Where's this happening most? Hiring. I've applied for 95 jobs. I'm just getting my doctorate, right, at OU. I've been there since 2017. 95 jobs, and only one have I not had to fill out a DEI statement. One. The University of Oklahoma is hiring, hand over fist, as many DEI officers as they possibly can. 65 to 70 right now. In every college. The College of Education just hired a DEI dean. So you don't know, they're implanting it and I've talked to the Board of Regents, I've talked to the governor, I've talked to the Secretary of Education, I've talked to all of your representatives. I've been up there. They do not like me on the internet because I point out where they're not doing it. And I'm not going to get into a bunch of that, but okay. Go to my Facebook page, go to my Twitter account. You'll find a lot of different things, okay? And they refuse to call out OUDEI, even though they know that this is what they're doing. There's no excuse, none. And when those three candidates come up here, after they leave, or you get to talk to them for a minute, you tell them, because they're avoiding it, because they got other agendas to push. But I'll tell you this, you've got 5 years, tops, 5. Because this is way more embedded in your schools than you have any idea. I was a sub, Adams Elementary. As a music teacher, K through 5, every song I was given to teach those kids had something to do with social justice. And it's just a repetition. Music ingrains messages on your heart. If you don't believe me, try to say the ABCs without singing it. Okay? But this is the mode of operation. This is it. It's discrimination. That's the only thing that can do it, and it's always at the front end. Or they're going to discriminate. If you disagree with them as a teacher, they're going to do everything they can to get you out. I've seen teachers here in Tulsa talk about one teacher of the year in their districts or teacher of the year in the state, right? And they come out, and their last year, They're put on remediation? What? Because they won't embed this in everything they do. And you think, oh, that's hyperbolic, right? That's hyperbolic. I just want to, I want to make, I'm running a little short on time, but I want to, do you all believe that CRT and DEI are the same thing? Okay, never allow anyone, okay, to say otherwise, but I want to show this slide. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but go to the next one. This is Ibram Kendi. You heard all over the news when I first made this. This was all over the news that Kendi is not a critical race theorist and that anti-racism has nothing to do with it. He says it right here in an interview with Slate. This is a transcript from him, okay? And he says, of course. Kimberly Crenshaw, who spoke at OU in 2021 and is one of the founders, the namer of critical race theory, as a keynote speaker for their NCORE, for their national DEI professional development group. He says right here, and I'm not going to read it to you, but that anti-racism, the way he defines, he gets his definitions from critical race theory. If you get your definitions, if you redefine something, and you get your definitions from an ideology, can you then say that it has nothing to do with the other? No, that would be lunacy, right? Well, that's what they're telling you, okay? So, but I want to take you to the direct connection between CRT and DEI and where it's going in the federal government, in your state government. And I want to show you, in Kendi's own words, how these things are very connected. Go to the next slide. So, DOA, what does that usually mean? No, to Kendi, it means the Federal Department of Anti-Racism. Okay, so this is a tweet I put up, but this is from Politico. This is Kendi. He wrote this. This is in 2020, right after George Floyd, and this is his recommendation. He says, to fix the original sin of racism, Americans should pass an anti-racist constitutional amendment that enshrines two guiding anti-racist principles in our Constitution. Racial inequity is evidence of racist policy, and only racist policy. That's the only definition. If there's inequity, it's racism. There can be no other explanation, okay? And the different racial groups are equals, okay? We can agree with that, but it's the mechanism on how to get this percentage that he wants. The amendment would make unconstitutional racial inequity over a certain threshold, as well as racist ideas by public officials, with racist ideas and public officials clearly defined. Here's the kicker, okay? It would establish and permanently fund the Department of Anti-Racism, DOA, comprised of formerly trained experts on racism and no political appointees. If you don't appoint them, you can't fire them. The DOA would be responsible for pre-clearing all local, state, and federal public policies to ensure they won't yield racial inequity, monitor those policies, investigate private racist policies when racial inequities surface, and monitor public officials for expressions of racist ideas. The DOA is in Politico. The DOA would be empowered with disciplinary tools to wield over and against policymakers and public officials who do not voluntarily change their racist policy and ideas. It's a fourth branch of government that would make all the other three null and void. Let me tell you something. The DOA is DEI. That is how every DEI office is operating in your school right now, this very moment, today. Unless your officials do something about it, it will not stop. I don't care how many school choice bills you pass. I don't care how many teachers you go after. I don't care any of the other things. Tax credit, no tax credit, doesn't matter. Because it will eat your school choice bills too. Don't believe me? Go look at Heritage Hall and Cassidy. It's eating them right now. And the next thing. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, I get a little pushy. This is what she says. I had the video up here, but it was too long. But this is what she says at minute 6. Embedding and integrating this work in everything you do is so critical. That's what she's telling the teachers. You do not have a curriculum problem. You don't have a materials problem. You have a personnel issue. And that is fed by the woke teacher pipeline from your universities. If you don't do something about it, we're done. We're done. Go to this next ones. Okay, this I just posted. Jordan Peterson retweeted me here. I'm proud of that, so I don't get much. But we had a conversation about it, and you might be seeing more of him and I together. But he says the degeneration continues. Okay? But here is the thing. This was sent to Norman Public Schools by OU, and they're advertising a racially segregated camp. It's racially, it says at the bottom, it says, identify as Black, Latinx, Indigenous or Native American or historically marginalized and or otherwise underrepresented group. Want to have long-lasting relationships? Free to all selected participants. It is only for them. So that's a breakdown of federal law right there. It's a breakdown of 1775, and your officials at this moment will not speak a word about it because they're pushing other agendas that do not matter. Because it will eat them too. It will eat them too. So just to sum up real quick, go to the next one, please. Thank you. Okay. Critical race theory, the ideology. Anti-racism is the ideology and public policy. And DEI is your divisions of ideological enforcement in every institution for which they reside. That is it. That has to be your main focus from this day forward, or nothing's going to change. None of the gender idea, because they push that. None of it. It will keep happening in every school you go to. So I just implore you, remember this. They don't need your guns if they have your children. They don't need your guns if they have your children. And they are taking them out from under you right now. Don't let them do it. Be loud. Be loud. Thank you.